Hi everyone, in this video we're going to be covering a variety of different measuring tools and how to use them. So let's get started. To begin with, we're going to be looking at measuring spoons. And measuring spoons come in a variety of different ways. Most of them come in sets because you'll use a wide variety of those particular items. Sometimes you have ones that will come apart pretty easily, and sometimes you have them that are on a little chain like that. Measuring spoons are going to be used for small amounts of any ingredient, whether it be liquid, solid, or dry. You may also see adjustable measuring spoons. These can be used for a wide variety of measurements. I don't use these very much because often I'm measuring a wide variety of ingredients, and in those different amounts, it's very difficult if I'm measuring a tablespoon of honey and then need a teaspoon of a dry ingredient. That means that I have to wash this again. So most of the time I end up using regular measuring spoons. I probably have about 5 different sets of measuring spoons. They're inexpensive, and a lot of times when you're baking, you end up measuring lots of different ingredients, and once you've used a measuring spoon for something liquid, it's very difficult to go back to dry because you have to wash it and dry it completely, and it's very difficult to do that very quickly when you're working with a recipe. So now we're going to cover how to use measuring spoons. So to begin with, we're going to look at measuring liquids. And I like to use, instead of using the ones that are linked together, I like to use my ones that are separate for measuring liquids, and then I can put them straight into the dishwasher or straight into the sink. So when you're measuring a liquid, you don't want to measure over top of your bowl. So I like to have a little small container off to the side that I can measure things over top of. It's very easy to overflow these, and so it's difficult to make sure that you have the amount. If you'll notice, even with that small amount, I even got some extra in there. So then I would just take that and dump it into whatever recipe that I'm making. When you're measuring dry ingredients, it's important to have a few things on hand. Your measuring spoons, whatever you're measuring, a little side bowl that any overflow could go into, and then having a straight edge spatula is going to help you a lot. So some things that you're measuring, like baking powder, it has this little lip right here. So what you're using that for is you're scooping that particular item and then scraping it off. That automatically levels it for you, and it means that you don't waste product, which is super helpful. Baking soda has the same thing. So it has this little piece of cardboard right there, and if you leave that on, you're able to level the baking soda. One thing that I've noticed over time with baking soda is that it tends to clump. So when you're measuring it, if you have some clumpy, this is some that I've had around for a while in the container that I measure out of, you can level it off, but if you'll notice, you have little bits that have scraped out of there because of the clumps that are already present. So you may need to break those clumps up a little bit before you start. The next type of measuring equipment we're going to look at is measuring cups. Measuring cups typically come in nested sets. So some of your nicer sets are going to have measurements such as 3/4 of a cup and 2/3 of a cup. These aren't necessarily needed, however. They can be helpful if you're having to wash a lot of measuring cups over time, but it's important to note that for 3/4 of a cup, you can use 1/4 of a cup 3 times, and for 2/3 of a cup, you can use 1/3 of a cup 2 times. For your measuring cups, you're only going to use these for dry ingredients and solid ingredients. So to start with, we're going to start out with measuring flour. Now, one thing that you'll notice is that I already have measuring cups in this particular bin. Because I do a lot of baking, I've realized that I spent a lot of time washing and drying measuring cups when I was making recipes. So I went to the local dollar store and bought a set of measuring cups for each of my bins that have all of my baking ingredients in it. This means I don't spend near as much time washing and drying measuring cups, and I take them out every month or so and wash them all. So flour is an ingredient that can measure drastically differently based on how you actually measure it. So any recipe that is written for volume, meaning it's measured by cups, you want to measure your flour in this way to make sure that you're the most accurate. You're also going to want to have your straight edge spatula. So you're going to spoon your flour into your cup. This makes sure that it isn't packed. If your flour is packed, your recipe will be very, very dry. And if it's too loose, then your recipe will be too wet. You'll scoop your flour in and level it out. So sugar is the next thing that you want to look at measuring. Sugar, because it doesn't pack anymore based on volume, all you have to do with sugar is scoop and sweep, and your measurements will be accurate. Brown sugar, you have to measure a little bit differently. For brown sugar, you want to pack it in, and brown sugar tends to clump, but it breaks up pretty easily with your hands. So you can scoop it in and press it down. If you'll notice, I'm wearing gloves with this. That's because the easiest way to pack it is with your hands, but you don't want to have your hands in a bin that you're going to be keeping around for a while. So once again, we're using the scoop and sweep method. With brown sugar, you want to be a little more careful with your sweep because it might take out clumps as it goes. Then once you pour it out, it holds its shape. The next type of ingredient that we're going to look at measuring is measuring solid ingredients. Solid ingredients are things that are pretty tough to measure. Generally, we're looking at things like peanut butter, mayonnaise, shortening, and butter. The best way to measure these is you'll scoop it out of your container with a rubber spatula and scrape it into your cup. Make sure that you get it into all the corners so that your measurements are accurate. You'll level it off gently and then scoop it into whatever container that you're using your rubber spatula. My favorite way to measure any sort of solid ingredient such as mayonnaise or peanut butter is to use one of these plunger measurers. It has a wide variety of volume measures around the side, including ounces, milliliters, cups, so you'll adjust to your particular measurement. And with these, because it has clear sides, I kind of look around the edges to make sure that it's pressed down to all the corners. You're going to level it across the top. And then you're going to press it out, and then you just scrape into your recipe. This is probably the most accurate way to measure solid ingredients, and I also use this for things like molasses and honey. Another way to measure solid ingredients such as shortening or butter is to buy it in sticks and then look at the measurements along the side. This stick of shortening is a cup, this stick of butter is half a cup. And as you see, you've got tablespoons marked and then fractions of a cup as well. You'll just use a knife to cut it and then peel off your wrapper. The next thing we're going to look at is how to measure liquids. Now, we've already looked at how to measure liquids with a measuring spoon, but oftentimes you need more of the liquid than a measuring spoon. So a lot of people will just use their dry measuring cups to measure these, and sometimes that works, but it's not a good idea. There's a few reasons for that. First of all, it's very unlikely that you're going to be able to get this to any location without spilling about half of it, which means that your measurements won't be accurate. The best way to measure liquids is by using a liquid measuring cup. So what you're going to do is pour it into your cup. I like this cup a lot because I can see the measurements from the top, which means that I don't have to get down level with it. But If you're using this type of measuring cup, you would pour it to your particular level, make sure that your liquid settles so that you're not reading things inaccurately, and then get down at eye level so that you're reading it correctly. The measurements are going to look different from every single angle, so you want to make sure that you're looking at it from a flat angle. Another way to measure items for baking is by using weights. Weights are a lot more accurate than volume measurements, especially for things like flour, because flour is subject to the way that you pack it. So what we're going to do today is look at how to measure with a scale. When you turn on your scale, it'll measure a weight of 0. You're going to put a bowl or a container onto it. Now this bowl weighs 5.89 ounces. But scales have a really easy way of subtracting the weight of the bowl. You're going to hit that tare button, and now it says that there's 0 ounces on the scale. This means that whatever we put into it, we're getting the weight of that and not the weight of whatever the bowl weighs. So we're going to measure 8 ounces of sugar, and this is the same process that you would follow with any sort of thing that you're measuring. So you'll just add that particular item in. As you'll notice, I went to 8.47 ounces, so we're just going to remove a little bit. And then you add in a little slowly until you get to your correct amount. If your recipe calls for grams, which most English recipes do because they work with the metric system, you can change your unit very easily on any scale. So that will help you measure out whatever type of measurement that you need to measure. Having a scale on hand is going to mean that you're much more able to make accurate baking recipes that are the same every time that you make them, and it also means that you'll be able to follow any recipe that you come across. An instant read thermometer are less expensive and must be calibrated on a regular basis. It's not really a good idea to have one of these as a homeowner unless you're very familiar with how to calibrate it and how to make sure it's accurate. An instant read digital thermometer is designed for you to use when the food is just about done to check the temperature. This pork roast, for example, needs to be 145 degrees. The sensor for measuring temperature is in the very tip, so it's very accurate with small pieces of meat. A meat thermometer is a thermometer designed to leave in the meat in the oven. It's able to withstand very high temperatures and will not be damaged. A deep fry thermometer usually comes with a clip for the side of a pot. It measures higher temperatures from 100 to 400, and this is going to be something that you leave on the pot while you deep fry in order to make sure that your temperature is correct for whatever you're frying. As you'll notice, the temperature doesn't go above 400. The reason for that is, in most cases, your points of ignition for any sort of oil are above that 400 mark, so it's important that you not go over 400 degrees.